guys? How's everyone feeling? Okay, I'm Pauline, as Jane. Yeah, seriously, I hope you're feeling good.
Except the peanut club.
We've got good pregnancy food on the table.
Yes, extremely healthy.
So I just want to thank Paulina for hosting and Jane and Mommy Talks. No, seriously, like this is a great opportunity for me. I'm very lucky in that I get to teach about birth often, and it's fun and exciting, but I don't often get to teach about some of the things we're going to talk about tonight, which I find very important and I'm very passionate about. I'm not a big Facebook advocate with like in your face, like information once in a while. So I really like to do things in person. So I am grateful for this opportunity. And I hope you gain some stuff out of it. So I actually made a little agenda because just to like keep myself on topic and also so to help the evening flow better. So first I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and how I got here, because some of the stuff is actually relevant to what we're going to be talking about. So my name is Pauline. Hi. I have a background in kinesiology, bachelor's of science. I graduated from York in 2007 with Jane. I trained as a doula with DONA, that's Doulas of North America. And I'm in the midst of completing a certification as a childbirth educator, and this is with Douglas College. I'm a mother of 3, and what else can I tell you? Okay, I'm gonna tell you a lot more, but for now I want to like go right into the role of a doula, because often I hear this question like, what's the difference between a doula and a midwife? Like some people hear about this word or they just have no idea what it is. So I just want to like put it out there so we all know what we're dealing with here. So a doula is actually the word doula comes from like it's Greek and it translates to like a female servant. It's like a servant of like the highest order. And really, like if you look at what a doula does, she really is there to support and serve a woman during her birth. So what a doula does, I'll break it down into 4 things. A doula provides information. She provides information for you during your pregnancy and during your birth. So as things arise during birth, she's able to help translate, like medical terminology for you and just, help you kind of assess the situation and help you make decisions based on good information. A doula can provide you with advocacy skills. So during your pregnancy, she can, as you deal with your caregivers and things come up and you have certain preferences, she can help guide you so that you can, be your own advocate and make the choices that you want for your birth. And the same thing during birth. When she assists you on your birth, as things come up, she can remind you and the caregivers of the preferences that you have. And it's just like, it's a very like in the moment, boom, 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 like she is there helping you advocate for your preferences. And then the third thing is support. So there's physical support and emotional support. So typically, if you like Google images doula, you'll always see like image of a woman and she's like hugging her doula, or her doula is giving her a massage. Like it could be very hands-on. Not to say that there are some women who don't want to be hands-on during birth, and that's totally understandable. Doulas can still have a really great role in that kind of birth, but she's trained with certain positions and movements and like helping you change up positions, if you're not comfortable, or if there's like something with the baby, like the baby needs to come down, so she'll help give you suggestions and guide you in those ways. And then emotional support. So I don't know if anyone is an experienced mother versus first time around, but labor is a very like trying time physically and emotionally and spiritually, and a doula can help make that transition easier. There often in most labors come a time where it gets like very emotionally overwhelming, and she's trained to like really literally like get in your face and get you back on track, get you focused. So that is another specialty of the doula. And I want to just add spiritually. A lot of women, a lot of my clients specifically like having like someone with a little bit of like spiritual, background knowledge, like where you can tie in like certain ideas. It helps during birth, because when you just like look at the technical medical aspects of birth, it gives us an understanding, but ultimately like even some of the doulas that I work with who are not religious or anything, like a lot of them are very spiritual. They get it. They get that birth is a miracle. So I'd like to add that doulas have that spiritual addition to them as well. So fine, agenda. Okay, fine. So now that we know the role of the doula, I wanna just tell you a little story. My husband teaches a lot of classes and story time is always like a favorite. So hopefully this is a good one. It's about my first birth, and it also is a nice backdrop to like how I got here, as well as how my doula was very helpful in my birth. So my husband and I got married in 2007, October, and we had plans to go to Israel just like a few weeks later, like about like 5-6 weeks later. Maine. And so, we had our tickets booked, and we were very excited. And then I started feeling nauseous, and I found out that I was pregnant. And this like kind of hit me out of nowhere. I didn't think it was that easy to get pregnant. I know for sure it's not that easy for a lot of women, and I just was not anticipating it. It was a big blessing. We're very, very grateful. But at the time I was like, what do I do now? So I did like what, any person would do. And I went to see my family doctor, and he like sent me for blood tests and ultrasound and confirmed I was pregnant. Great. And then he said, okay, I'll set you up with an obstetrician. So that way you go to Israel, and then when you get back, you're all set up, you'll have your appointment set up, and you'll be good to go. So that's pretty much what I did. I never even met her before leaving for Israel. And so that was that. And now while in Israel, I think Israel like had a big role in my becoming who I am today, because of some of the people I met, some of the things I learned there. I was very privileged to have taken childbirth classes in Israel with this woman named Masha Fabian. She is a Lamaze trained nurse. So she worked as a nurse in the US. So she had this like great medical background. And then she also did extensive training with Lamaze, which is the type of training that I have done. Anyway, so the classes were really great. And what else can I tell you about Masha? I didn't know this at the time, but looking back, I remember myself like taking these like insane notes, and like she gave me like a special look. Like she just knew there was something about me that like I was gonna be like in the birth world. And I think from all those women in the class, I think there was like 8 or 9 of us. I think I was probably the only one who was even thinking of like a natural birth and stuff like that. So I took these great classes, and then we were getting ready to come back to Toronto. And there was like another friend of mine who was expecting around the same time as me. And there was like a couple other people I spoke to who were also expecting for the first time. And when I spoke to them, like I realized there is something like different about me. Like I'm really into this birth stuff, and other people don't really think about these things before birth. They just kind of go with the flow with like their caregivers, and they just do whatever research or reading they feel necessary, but like that's about it. So later on, I would realize that this is something that we need in the city, especially the type of classes that like Masha was able to offer, because her being like a religious woman, and she also threw in like beautiful spiritual ideas about birth. So again, the medical mixed with the spiritual, like it ties together beautifully. So I was like determined to bring that to Toronto. So thank God, that's what I'm trying to do. Okay, fine. So we get to Toronto, I meet my obstetrician, and it's like, I finally realized that there's like 2 models of like in the birthing world. There's like the doctor, hospital model, and there's the midwifery model, which I didn't really know too much about until I started investigating at that time. And I said, hey, like clearly I am more of like the midwifery type model. So I made phone calls, and I called, I think, every single midwife practice in the city. And at the time I didn't know like the right things to say to get in. Now I could like advise, I actually advise women when they want to get a midwife and it's a little bit late in their pregnancy, like I'm able to help those women now. But back then I had no idea what I was doing. I could not get a midwife. Fine. So I was with this doctor. I won't talk too much about her because she's like a whole other story. I think it's pretty typical. I used to travel and sit in the waiting room for like literally 2 hours and then see her for literally 2 minutes. And I'd come with questions, and she'd unfortunately just dismiss them. And like I think I cried, pregnancy, emotional, and also I was like so passionate just to like have that rejection. I was just like, ugh. So I spoke to a couple friends and someone mentioned this doula thing. And I'm like, okay, interesting. So I got a phone number and I spoke to this doula in the community. Her name is Blossom. She ended up being my doula. Great. So she actually helped me, like, remember those things I was talking about, information, advocacy. During my pregnancy, she was really able to help me before and after my prenatal visits. She, you know, with the birth plan and everything, she was just able to get me geared up for that and get like my confidence up and just get me ready like on many different levels. And then comes time for the birth, and it was like one of these like textbook typical really long first labors. I don't want to like talk too much about it, but like I will tell you it was very intense for even for a first time around, because my contractions were never longer than 3 minutes apart. With my waters broken, it was very intense for like 24 hours. And looking back again, like because I was pregnant in Israel and like swimming every other day and walking everywhere and schlepping my shopping home, I was very physically prepared for this. And like if I had to do that now, I don't think I would be able to do it naturally. It was very intense. So having my doula there was so important, and like when we were deciding if we could take a doula, you know, they could be very pricey, especially for some of the really experienced ones. We almost didn't take her, but then I realized this is like very important to me, and we were so happy that we decided this, because it was clear that it just like who knows what the outcome would have been without her. She was literally by my side from like the second we got to the hospital till the end. She didn't leave me. I spent, I think, 12 hours in the shower, and she was by my side the whole time. Like I needed like pressure on my back. A lot of women find that helpful with their contractions. And she like, I don't think she was soaked, but she was pretty much like in there with me. Like she was there the whole time. I had like one little emotional slip up in transition. I don't know if you guys know the terminology, but like right at the end when it's like the toughest part, when most women are like, ooh, epidural would be nice this time. Like I had this emotional slip up, and she like basically like did this whole doula thing that she's like in your face, like focus, whatever. They're not tough, they're good, but they really get you to focus. It was great. And I'm so grateful. And that was my experience. And clearly I value the role of the doula. So that was my experience with my first experience with my doula. Just to give an illustration, I think it's nice when you hear a story, because that way you can kind of, you know, like it's more relatable. Okay, so now I want to like, before we get to these wonderful 6 things you need to know, excuse me, for a healthy and satisfying birth, I just want to give a little backdrop for that. So I want to talk about a few things. Birth as a long-term memory, a little bit of birth history, and then I just want to look at this study on birth satisfaction. So again, birth as a long-term memory, history, and birth satisfaction. So in doula school, they made us do this like little assignment. They asked us to go and speak to like the oldest woman that we could find and ask her about her birth experience. And what everyone found, like the next week we all came back to class and we shared our findings. We found that like women remember their births, and usually in great detail. And, you know, you ask like the 70, 80, 90-year-old, like they remember specific things and what people said and what was going on that day. And like they just remember vividly like their birth experience. So that was like, we found that interesting, but yeah, that's backdrop number 1. The next thing I want to talk about is a little bit of birth history, just to show you, like, so we can understand where we are today in the birthing world. And that can help us understand these 6 healthy practices a little bit more. So I'm going to show you some graphic images. It's not so bad, but this is basically images. I don't know if you could see. Yeah. So images of various cultures and time frames, but basically I just want to illustrate like the idea. Before the hospitalization of birth. The hospitalization of birth was about like the early 1900s, like 1915, 1920. That's when women started going to hospitals. Prior to that, you see, it's like not that long ago. Prior to that, women gave birth at home or at like a relative's house or someone, you know, another woman's house. And look how many people surround her. She's supported very well. Mothers, sisters, aunts, of course the midwives. And I didn't find like the best art, but basically a constant theme that you will see in like art depictions across different cultures is that the woman is central and she's never freaking out or in pain. Like she's usually very strong and supported. And if you look at this creepy one, she's central, right? Obviously very central here. She has support around her. And the midwife is kind of like, look how small she is. Like, it's like the woman is the center and everyone around her is there to support her and, you know, help her through this. So fine, that's just a little bit of, oh yeah, you want to see my creepy drawings? So then we get to the hospitalization of birth. Like I said, it's 1950, I was actually just studying this yesterday because I find this stuff really interesting. I'm a big nerd. Like, why did women find this appealing? This like hospitalization of birth. You'll see in a minute like why it was kind of wacko, but like at the beginning stages of it. Has anyone heard of the term twilight sleep? Okay, so they called it twilight sleep because, okay, but I don't want to get so graphic. I don't want to like freak people out. Basically, this is what happened. Just picture this. You would go into labor. This is like for the elite women of the time. If you were elite, you would go to a hospital because they had these like beautiful birthing suites overlooking like mountaintops and like it was gorgeous, you know, gorgeous rooms. You'd you'd stay there for like a few weeks, a month even, and you'd have like people taking care of you, taking care of your baby, and it was like you were like at a spa for the month. Fine, sounds great. But what would happen is you would get to the hospital, your husband would, you know, give you a kiss goodbye, be like, see you later. And you'd go in with your luggage and you'd get prepped and you would be given these drugs. Like there was two main drugs. One would kind of like, was supposed to be for like the pain, and then the other one would like just knock you out. So what happens, women had like zero recollection of their births. And what they found later is that, or, you know, after studying it, is that like women still experienced pain, but they just didn't remember anything. So that's great, right? So this is the beginning of the hospital births. That's why they called it twilight sleep. So.
And then there's this time when they tie you up.
Yeah. So I didn't want to be graphic, but yes, they would actually, because women were knocked out, but they still experienced pain.
Years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, people don't do this now.
Well,
That's crazy.
It's in the 50s, I think they did that.
It was in the 50s.
Again.
Yeah. Good time frame. Yes. So it was like it was in the 30s and 40s. The 50s, we'll see.
They didn't have like technology or
So
anything.
so let me just give you a little bit of history since we're talking about it. So yes, women would actually be like strapped to their beds because they were like out of it, but they'd still experience pain. So they'd be like, it was like, I had to watch this. It's not pretty.
They were clawing at the doctors, that's why they tied them down.
Okay, fine. I don't want to talk about this in detail. I just want to say a few things.
They were not in their right mind.
You need to not do this now.
We're not doing this now.
I'm doing 6 weeks.
No, this does not happen. This is historical, okay?
Yeah, they don't do it now.
Okay, so here we go.
Sure, where?
So they stopped this twilight sleep, obviously, because of different complications. Some of the complications were emotional, i.e., that it removed the mother from the experience of childbirth, leaving her with no memory of the labor or delivery of the child. As one Nebraskan woman stated of the experience of twilight sleep, this is a quote, "The next thing I knew, I was awake, and then I thought to myself, I wonder how long before I shall begin to have the baby. And while I was still wondering, a nurse came in with a pillow, and on the pillow was a baby, and they said I had it. Perhaps I had, but I certainly can never prove it in a courtroom."
Yeah.
Okay?
That's the problem, because you don't connect with the baby. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot of problems with this, but I just want to, I'm telling you this for a reason. There was a response to this, obviously. In the 50s and 60s, you hear of names like Bradley, Lamaze, these big birth educators coming out and teaching women. Prior to this hospitalization, when we were in this time, you did not have Bradley and Lamaze and Pauline Renard, readyforbaby.ca. Okay, there was no childbirth education. Why was there no childbirth education, and why were women so strong? Because women gave birth at home. Birth was a normal, natural process, and by the time you were ready to have your first child, you were pretty like well versed in birth. Like you had either seen it or like your sisters, your aunts, your mothers, everyone could tell you their birth stories, and they were not scary. Like they were good stories, and you knew, and you were confident, and you were strong, and obviously like my husband had this whole philosophical thing today about. He said it's funny how it's always like the poor people, because when hospitalization happened, the lower income women still gave birth at home, obviously with better outcomes, like, you know, just healthy outcomes. And the elite women like had to go through all this craziness. And he said, like, it's funny, like the like in the beginning, like the elite, you know, the elitists had like white bread and the poor people ate whole grain bread. And then as he's like, just to show that time makes no difference, like later we realized that like they had it right all along. Fine, great. I'm not a big hippie, I swear. Okay, fine. So, great. So now, this kind of, like we still have a gap in childbirth knowledge, okay? We've made some great advancements. We have the epidural. Women can now be awake and watch their babies being born without experiencing pain. So you still have that some of the advancements, but since the hospitalization of birth, I also like didn't mention that like that twilight era is when these like routine medical interventions, we're gonna talk about that later, began, okay? So I don't wanna talk about details, but like just imagine you're knocked out, like the doctors wanna get the baby out, so they're gonna do stuff to you to get the baby out. So that's like when all those routine medical things began. Now, most doctors don't do routine medical things, they use these medical interventions as the need arise. But there still is a gap, and good childbirth education and knowledge and research, and just we kind of have to use the tools we have in this childbirth, in like the childbirth education world, to kind of regain what we once had, which was knowledge and, you know, confidence and the confidence in our bodies, like ability to give birth. You know, like we have this ability, like women forget, like they often just have no idea that they're able to do this on their own. So they just have to be taught again. So fine, that's kind of what I do. If anyone wants good childbirth classes. Fine. And then the last thing for the backdrop is this study. It's the study in birth satisfaction. So what it was called is Pain and Women's Satisfaction with the Experience of Childbirth. So what were they looking at? They were looking at the role of pain and pain relief, and to see like what kind of effect it has on a woman's experience and her satisfaction of childbirth, right? So what did they find? I'm just gonna summarize it. I was like telling my husband like all the technical things. He's like, don't say that. He's like, just summarize it, make it easy. I'm like, okay, fine. So what did they find? So they found that pain relief, medical interventions played a very, very, very minute role, like a very minimal role compared to where I'm going to tell you what it is that is like the actual factor in what determined a woman's satisfaction. So it's interesting. They were actually looking to find connections between pain and pain relief and medical interventions. Like if you have pain relief, then you're going to have a great birth. But they didn't find that at all. What they found was that the big factor, the key player in a satisfying birth is the way that a woman is cared for, the attitudes and the behaviors of her caregivers. Okay? So again, this is like why the doula role I think is really important, because of the system that we're in today. Don't get me wrong, there's some amazing medical staff, nurses and midwives and doctors, but their role is very specific. It's very like just concerned with your well-being and the health of you and your baby. They're not there to constantly support you the way women need to be supported in birth. Fine. Also, like just as an example, like I forgot to mention this before, but the reason why birth is like so natural to me is because I was very lucky. My mother, I think because her mother was like low income and didn't give birth in like this twilight era, this twilight sleep. I think she had a normal natural birth. And then my mother, when it came time to give birth to my brother and I, she had a normal natural birth without pain medication. I'm not saying that's like the only way to do it, but I'm just saying like this is the experience she had in a Toronto hospital in the 80s. And while everything was all normal and natural and great and healthy, the attitudes and behaviors of her caregivers, i.e. her nurses and the doctor, were very, very crappy. Like she was not encouraged. They actually made fun of her. She actually remembers to this day remember the birth memories. She remembers to this day exactly the insults they gave her. She was, so just to show you that it's not this like pain and pain, like if I don't experience pain, I'll have a great time. It's not, that is not the key player in having a satisfying birth. You need to be well supported. So you have your husbands, hopefully your partners, and if you could hire a doula, that is ideal. And just to build your own confidence, and your caregivers, you should have a birth plan. It shouldn't be like in your face, like, you know, like this is what I want. Like it's like, it should be open-minded, but like they should have an idea of where you're coming from and what your preferences are. And the people who are supporting you should be able to like help you advocate so that you can have this things that we need to know. Yeah. There's a great handout. I'm going to go off the handout and then I'm going to give it to you. So no cheating. I'm going to talk about it first and then you guys can take this home. So this is based on Lamaze International's, like this is like their 6 things. There's very extensive material on this. Jane was so kind to print out a whole booklet on these 6 things that go into great detail. There's also like essays on each one of the things. There's also videos. I use them in my classes all the time. I find them very useful. Even though my certification is not going to be with Lamaze anymore, they switched it like midway. It's a great resource and they have some really great stuff online. Okay, great. So we're looking at birth plans. Okay, Lamaze healthy birth practices are based on the best medical evidence available and are designed to promote a safe and healthy pregnancy and birth. Point number 1, let labor begin on its own. Letting the body go into labor on its own is almost always the best way to know that the baby is ready to be born and the body is ready for labor. I didn't bring my books or anything, but there's a really cute graph, I don't know what you call it, chart of different things. Like nobody really knows like the one thing that causes a woman to go into labor because there are many different factors. The baby has to be ready. The placenta, there's factors in the placenta. There's factors with the woman, like with hormones. There's also like known things about the baby's lungs. Again, there's many different factors. Spiritually speaking, like if you want, let's say like a woman who observes Torah, like is thinking of, or her caregiver is thinking of, inducing her, or she's thinking of becoming induced, you're actually like halachically not allowed to be induced unless there is a good medical reason for it. Because spiritually speaking, there is a precise moment that a neshama, a soul, has to come into the world. Actually, I just went on a birth recently, and I think this kind of like, you could see this, again, doula work is so cool, it's like spiritual, man. Like, you could see this like in action. This woman that I went with, she was having a pretty fast labor. We were in the hospital. She wanted an epidural and did not get one. She took me along as her insurance, and she actually ended up needing her insurance because she didn't get this epidural. She really needed the support, and she was very, very thankful. Anyways, so as she was laboring, I could tell just like from experience and whatever, like that, like she could be pushing by now. Like, I don't know, like it took like an extra 40 minutes, it seemed like, for her to start pushing. In my head, I didn't say anything. Anyways, like about an hour later, her baby was born, and we looked at the time, and it was like 3 minutes after candlelighting on Friday night. So like this baby needed to be born on Shabbos. Like it was so clear. I was like, it's true. Like this like the neshama has to come at a certain time. So that's like spiritually, but physically, we're talking more physical right now. Letting labor begin on its own is often the best way for like a healthy labor, for labor to progress in a good, healthy way. Oftentimes, women who need to be induced or choose to be induced, many times, because you enter labor in a medical state, like it has to be medically induced, then you get this like cascade of interventions often. Sometimes women are lucky and their bodies really are ready, or their bodies really take to it and they're lucky and it doesn't last so long and no complications. And I say like they're very lucky, but more often than not, these complications, these interventions need to come up. And I'm talking about it's not working, then they have to give more drugs, and then the pain is too great, and then she can't handle the pain, she's stuck on the bed, like all these things come up. And then with obviously the most complicated cases, her baby needs to be born by cesarean, where it wouldn't have necessarily been like that if her body went into labor on its own. Now, all that said, there are circumstances where they do need to medically induce, and you shouldn't be like, no, my childbirth educator told me, like, no. So there are certain cases where it's a risk to the mother or to the baby's health, and you should not be opposed to that. There are also natural ways to induce, and I often, I help women with this every other week. Women whose doctor, their due dates have passed, or that their doctors are talking, and the most recent woman that I helped, she told me she was already a few days past her due date. She said, so I have until next Wednesday. And I'm like, oh, why next Wednesday? She's like, oh, because my doctor's on call and he wants to deliver the baby. I'm like, that's not a reason to be induced. I explained that to her and she really did get it. So there are things that you can do to get your labor going. I don't know if you want to talk about them now, but you can always email me or call me or ask me if it ever comes to that. I'm happy to share information. Okay, so we're going to go to point number 2. Walk, move around, and change positions throughout labor. Moving in labor, i.e. not confined to a bed, helps women cope with strong and painful contractions while gently moving the baby into the pelvis and through the birth canal. So it's funny. There was one childbirth class where we went around and we asked some of the women, what's your image of a normal birth? And one of the first time pregnant mothers was like, okay, you go into labor, you go to the hospital, you lie in the bed, you have your baby. I'm like, ooh, so fine. Movies. Hollywood did that to us. But that is not a typical laboring woman. Typically, when women go into labor, and as their labor progresses and it gets, more difficult, they have this need to get up and move. And you see it all the time. Early labor, you can kind of get through doing whatever you're doing. If it's during the day, you're doing your thing. If it's shopping, working, whatever it is. If it's at night, you try and rest. But then once you start entering active labor, most women cannot lie through their contractions unless you're are really focused on the Bradley method, which is really focused on relaxing the whole body, and women have practiced this and whatnot. But most women have this tendency to want to get up and move. And that is a natural, healthy response. And there's it's actually a good response. Your body knows what it wants, it knows what it needs. A lot of the stuff the comfort techniques that I teach are just very basic things like rocking and what is this? Women do this naturally. What is this doing? It's obviously helping you cope with your pain, but it's also allowing the baby to find a good position and make its way down. So just kind of listen to your own body when it comes to moving throughout labor. Okay, fine, we're gonna go to point number 3. Bring a loved one, friend, or doula for continuous support. In childbirth, a woman feels better when supported by people she trusts and those who use encouragement. We just spent the last half hour talking about that, so we kind of know about that, right? Point number 4, avoid interventions that are not medically necessary. When interventions, example, induction, epidural, continuous monitoring, are used in a routine manner, women and babies are exposed to unnecessary risks. So this is I touched on this when we talked about being induced, when it was just as an example, but even if you're not induced and you enter labor and then you, a lot of women, the epidural is great. I'm very pro epidural. I'm not anti-epidural, just to make it clear. I think it has a great role in our birthing world, but some women, especially women who don't take the time to want to learn anything or just hear that there are other methods out there to cope with labor, some women take it much too early, and that can in fact slow your labor and lead to more interventions and complications. So that's why it says to avoid these interventions that aren't medically necessary. And then obviously that when it comes to the epidural, that includes learning about other techniques to manage your pain, because there are other techniques to manage pain. Also, I teach this to women because in the case of my friend who wanted the epidural and couldn't get one. So even if you are planning the epidural, there is this tiny chance that either you won't be able to get one or it won't be effective. So just plan B, insurance, as my friend called it. It's a good idea to know other techniques. So the 5th point is avoid giving birth on your back and follow the body's urges to push. Upright positions are safe during pushing and can make it easier to push the baby out. This could mean squatting, sitting, or lying on the side. There's lots of diagrams, videos, just to get an idea of what this means. But just using gravity, just like the woman who needs to sway and upright during her labor, during pushing, your baby still has a fair amount of work. You and your baby have a fair amount of work to do to get the baby down through the canal. And it's just very simple, science. I do like a visual in my classes, like I take an empty water bottle with a marble, and you're like, okay, like try and get the marble out. If you just tip the marble a bit and use gravity, like this baby is gonna come out easier if you're using gravity on your side. And I just wanna add a little pointer that a first-time birth, it is very normal to push for 1.5 to 2 hours, sometimes more. So don't be discouraged if you're pushing and if you hear anything discouraging around you, just remember what I'm saying. It is very normal. Your baby is kind of doing this like rocking position. Like as you push, your baby's coming down. When you stop pushing, it kind of goes back. And it has this whole like way to make its way down. And every push is doing something. However, if you do feel that you're pushing, or people are saying your pushing is not effective, remind your support people or put on your birth plan that you want to try different positions. Me personally, this is the hardest part of my births, are pushing. I hear these women like, oh, like I coughed, the baby came out. Or like 2 pushes, the baby was, like, I hear this all the time and I'm like, shut up. Like for me, it's not like that. And luckily my midwives already know this about me and they know what to do. And I'm always changing positions. And it takes like, for my 3rd baby, it took 45 minutes. And that's a 3rd baby. Like for my first, don't even ask, it was like 2.5 hours. But, and also the good news is the contractions for pushing are much milder and more spread apart than your contractions in transition, which is like the tough part of labor. So it does get easier by pushing, and that is your nature's way of giving your body a break and giving you like that extra wind, extra strength to, get that baby out. So don't be scared of pushing, okay? And then the last point is keep mother and baby together. It's best for mother, baby, and breastfeeding. Mother and baby share a natural instinct to be close after birth. You think? It's like been inside you for 9 months. And experts recommend that a healthy newborn be placed and cared for skin to skin on the mother's abdomen or chest. Now, luckily, a lot of the hospitals have this policy. It's like up on the wall. Like they do practice this. I just want to add though that skin to skin, we hear about this and we do it for the first hour after birth, which is tremendous. There's so many awesome benefits, like not just like, it's like, okay, I love hearing this one when I'm at a birth and the nurse is like, the baby's cold, we have to take it to the warmer. What do like hypothermic, whatever victims, when you like fall in ice cold, what do they say? Body heat, right? Like the best place for the baby to maintain a proper temperature is on the mother's skin, okay? That's one thing. But it also, skin to skin helps regulate blood sugar levels, heart rate, there's blood pressure. There's so many benefits, and it's again, the baby's been inside you. Like it like when it's on the mother, it's just like it's used to flowing with the mother's flow. They even, like my friend was telling me that usually babies sleep really close to the mothers, like in bassinets or co-sleeping or whatnot. But they say like if let's say your baby's not in the same room as you, you should reverse the baby monitor so that the baby hears your heart. Here's you breathing, or put like a heartbeat on. It's so used to being inside you that these things like help it function, like physiologically. And also about skin to skin, in terms of nursing and engorgement, like sometimes, people talk about birth, people don't really talk about breastfeeding so much. And for a lot of women, it can be a challenge the first few days, the first few weeks. So whatever, that's a whole other topic on its own. And I suggest that everyone have literally phone numbers on your fridge of like lactation consultants. It's worth every penny. Like you don't understand how much formula is. And also obviously the health benefits of breastfeeding. It's immense. I think the government of Ontario just put like either 2 million or 2 billion into raising awareness on breastfeeding, and they get it. They're like, there's health benefits, long-term health benefits to breastfeeding. So if you get through those first few weeks and you get the right help, it is worth everything. But I also wanted to say about skin to skin was that it's not only important for the first hour, it's actually really important for the first few weeks of birth. And a great little tool for that is to get one of these like long baby wraps that like you literally wear the baby like on you. And that helps like a lot of babies who like are colicky or like fussy, especially during like the early hours of the evening. It's like these wraps are like actually magical. Like you put them in, the baby's like, ugh. And again, it's
up to 20 pounds.
I wore my son in it, and I couldn't survive without it. Like I literally couldn't, because like I'm making dinner with my son. I had 2 other kids. I think I wore him in it until he was like 8 or 9 months. Big boy. Okay, fine. So now I'd like to open up the floor to questions we could talk about.